In the fourth year of their marriage, Alastair Whittaker suddenly posted a WeChat story. The story was a video made from 999 photos. In the video, the woman started out shy and unable to look directly at the camera. But by the end, she had become confident and beautiful, able to look at the camera boldly. Loving someone is like nurturing a flower, it requires care. Alastair adored his wife deeply. After 4 years of marriage, he had never once shared a photo of her publicly to protect her from external attention. Amidst the sea of praise, one comment stood out. "What about Serafina Whittaker?" A minute later, the comment was deleted. "I am Serafina." I stared at the spot where the comment had disappeared, my eyes stinging from staring too long. Reluctantly, I posted a wish for their happiness and turned off my phone. That night, Alastair, who hadn't come home for a long time, suddenly returned. The moment the door opened, I felt my whole body freeze. Alastair stood there with a woman's coat draped over his arm. Behind him was Isolde Harrington, whom I hadn't seen in ages. She was the center of attention in everyone's social media feeds. She had been back from abroad for about a year. Over the past year, I had often seen her shadow in Alastair. It wasn't until half a month ago that she first appeared before me. Every time she came, Alastair and I would have a fierce argument. My fingers clenched the door frame so tightly that my fingertips turned white. When I looked at her, my eyes were swollen from crying all day. This made me feel embarrassed. But it didn't matter. Anyway, this isn't the first time Alastair has done something like this. "Why are you still standing there?" I heard Alastair's words and wanted to say something, but no words came out. I turned my head and followed his gaze toward Isolde. She was soaking wet. Alastair always speaks in half sentences. He looked at Isolde with concern. He probably wanted me to go find her a clean set of clothes. However, Alastair was well aware of the situation. I had some experiences when I was a child, so I hated it when others wore my clothes. "There's no need to trouble Serafina." Just as everyone fell silent, Isolde spoke up. She hadn't changed much in the past 5 years and still looked like a vibrant college student. She smiled gently, her hand unconsciously resting on Alastair's arm. "Alastair, you remember my size, right?" Alastair's eyes flickered, revealing a gentle expression. Upon receiving confirmation, Isolde tilted her head and looked toward the living room. When her gaze swept past the wedding photo of me and Alastair on the wall, she clearly furrowed her brows. Alastair, standing beside her, immediately understood. The wedding photo that had been hanging in the living room for 4 years had been taken down so casually. "Alastair," I called out to him softly. He stopped in his tracks but didn't turn around. I knew he was listening. "Do you want to divorce me?" Alastair's body suddenly stiffened. After hearing those words, he finally gave me a glance. He raised his eyelids, looked me up and down a few times, and coldly rejected my proposal. "You said 5 years. Didn't you? Do you want to back out now?" "Yes, we got married through an agreement, but I actually forgot why I agreed to this in the first place. Now I feel really uncomfortable. Worse than eating a fly." I could only watch as he tossed the wedding photo into an out-of-sight corner. Then he went upstairs with Isolde. "We've been married for 4 years and 10 months. We've known each other for 15 years and 10 months. I thought that no matter what happened, I could warm Alastair's heart, but I rushed into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and let the water drown out my sobs. The person in the mirror looked strange and terrifying. My eyes were red and swollen, my face pale, like a nagging, annoying woman. I didn't know how long I had been crying. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the eyebrow razor on the sink and instinctively picked it up. Tracing it along my wrist, just as I was about to act, someone grabbed me. "Even if I have to die, I won't die here." Alastair, who had been upstairs with Isolde, somehow appeared behind me. He pressed himself tightly against my back, blocking me from the sink so I couldn't move. There was an ugly scar around my wrist. He lowered his head and gently traced the scar with his fingers. I looked at Alastair's expression in the mirror. It wasn't good. I forced a small smile. I didn't want to hurt myself. Alastair didn't believe me. He let go of me and forcefully took the razor blade from my hand. I stood there watching him and said softly, "My mother died like this, cutting her wrists with an eyebrow razor, but when I went to identify her body, I noticed her expression was peaceful. Maybe it didn't hurt much. So I just wanted to try. What happens after you try? Go to the underworld to avenge yourself against the woman who sold you out for $10,000? Alistair interrupted me, his face showing displeasure. The eyebrow razor had accidentally cut into my skin, but he didn't notice. I shrugged and didn't respond. He pulled me into the bedroom with some force and threw me onto the bed. Is Isolde here? I asked seriously. Alistair's hand, which had been tucking the blanket, stopped. He stayed there beside me, propping himself up like he was doing a plank for a long time. Finally, she seemed very angry and said something through gritted teeth before leaving. Oh, maybe she left because I scared her. No wonder Alistair was so angry. I remember the last time he was this angry was when I smashed his blackboard. He must have something to hide. The blackboard in the attic was covered with Isolde's name. In the middle, there was a large I need you, which made me feel a little uncomfortable. At that time, Alistair and I had been married for less than a year. I was feeling proud and very happy, but I got so angry that I grabbed a chair and smashed his blackboard. The loud noise caught Alistair's attention. When he saw me standing barefoot among the blackboard shards, still holding the chair, he suddenly lost his mind and rushed over, pushing me away. Then he knelt down on the shards and cried bitterly. That was the first time I had ever seen him cry, and it made me feel a little sorry for him. You wrote Isolde's name so many times. I didn't cry. Why are you crying? I knelt down to wipe his tears, only to discover my hands were covered in blood. I was startled by the bright red color. We need to go to the hospital, Serafina, come with me. He pulled me out without hesitation, insisting that I was sick. Even the doctor said I had post-traumatic stress disorder and delusions of persecution. Alistair looked at me, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. It was utterly absurd. Alistair stayed by my bedside all night. When I opened my eyes again, I saw him leaning his head against the pillow, looking tired. It was still raining outside, and the rain hitting the glass was so loud it was annoying. I got out of bed barefoot and stood by the window. Alistair, who had been startled awake, grabbed my arm, lifted me up, and placed my feet on his slippers. Neither of us said a word. I leaned against the windowsill and slowly turned around to kiss him. But he dodged me. Isolde is back. Why don't you go marry her already? What's the point of clinging to that agreement? I had intended to act nonchalant, to save face. But as the words left my mouth, my voice trembled involuntarily. Alistair's throat moved, and the hand around my waist was so hot it startled me. If only, he wanted to say, but he didn't? I could feel his grip tightening. That was his habit when he was nervous. Dim light filtered through the curtains that weren't fully drawn. In that moment, I was startled to see a fleeting glimpse of ridiculous affection in his eyes. What if I said, I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you? What if I said Isolde would never come back? Those words swirled slowly through my mind, making me feel uneasy. Actually, the knock on the door had already sounded when Alistair spoke his second sentence. I turned my head to look out the window and saw Isolde standing there with a resentful expression on her face, so I gently pushed him, go answer the door. Alistair froze, the knocking sounded loud in the rain. He didn't seem to hear it and stared at me strangely. The knocking grew louder, seeing that he still didn't move. I gently kicked him with my toe. You said Isolde wouldn't come looking for you, but she really did. I said it casually, but my hands were sweating inside my sleeves. What if Alistair really went to open the door? What if Isolde came in? Alistair really went to open the door. I lowered my head, tugging at the threads of my sweater, too curious to look up. When the door opened, my gaze followed it. Isolde stood there with a radiant smile. When Alistair faced her, there was none of the gloomy atmosphere he had toward me. He lowered his head slightly, revealing a gentle expression. It was pouring rain outside. The heavy raindrops fell on her, making her white dress slightly transparent. I saw Alistair's hand trembling as he gripped the doorknob. Isolde smiled and grabbed his hand, then the door slammed shut behind her. Then, as if to provoke me, she stood at the top of the stairs on the second floor and smiled at me. Sorry, Serafina, I left in such a hurry last night. Something was left on Alistair's bed. I stared blankly as she confidently walked into Alistair's bedroom. When she came out again, she was holding a white undergarment between her fingers. When that smug smile appeared before me, a surge of indescribable anger welled up inside me. I started counting down, 10 steps, 9 steps, while Isolde continued talking to me. You've been married to Alistair for so long. Has he ever spent the night with you? 8 steps, 7 steps, 6 steps. You're just someone Alistair picked up, taking advantage of my absence to do as you please here. And that Thaddeus Caldwell isn't a good person either. You two siblings are really unreliable. Why didn't your parents send you somewhere farther away? Thaddeus and I are twins. My parents didn't care much about me. They favored Thaddeus instead. Thaddeus was always sickly as a child. Later, a Taoist priest said it was because I was unkind to him, so I was abandoned without mercy. At the time, I was only 10 years old, holding a bowl with a chipped edge, walking down the street when I met 13-year-old Alistair. He thought I was begging. He casually pulled out $200 and threw it into my bowl. The red bills were soaked in the thin porridge, and my hand trembled, causing the bowl to fall into the snow. I knelt in the snow, clinging to his legs, begging him to take me in. That day, the snow fell heavily, and I longed for a warm home, so when I bowed my head, I didn't feel the pain. Now, when I think back to that day, it does make me feel a bit embarrassed. 5 steps, 4 steps, 3 steps. Didn't I tell Alistair back then? He doesn't love you? Why marry him and suffer? I'm back now. He loves me. You'd better leave. My lips were covered in blood. I bit down hard on the flesh inside my mouth. I took 2 steps. I walked toward her and pushed her gently. She fell down the staircase from the 2nd floor. I felt a dizzy spell. I heard Alistair calling my name. When I looked up, Isolde was standing at the top of the stairs, smiling at me. Her mouth was almost split to her ears, looking terrifying, not like a normal person at all. Then I heard a dull thud, everything went black, and I fainted. 5 years were almost up. Alistair realized that if he didn't act soon, he would lose Serafina. So he compiled all the photos he had taken of Serafina since he was 13 into a video. He wanted to tell everyone that his wife's name was Serafina, but everyone only responded with the phrase, "May you live 100 years in harmony." Alistair stared at those 4 words for a long time. Finally, he understood some truths. Serafina connected all of this back to Isolde, just like that time half a month ago. He had merely been discussing business with a group of men at a drinking party. But when he returned home, Serafina had been sniffing him like a puppy and eventually looked at him with reddened eyes. "You said you were on a business trip, but why do you smell like the perfume Isolde liked?" For 5 years, Alistair had been on edge every moment. He was always worried that something might happen to Serafina. But it was impossible to guard against everything. Countless times, she had been unjustly accused, and Isolde's reputation had been fabricated. Alistair felt exhausted. Perhaps the alcohol intensified his negative emotions, or maybe the pressure he was under had reached its limit. He grabbed Serafina, who was still lost in her own thoughts, and shouted at her, "Isolde is dead. She won't be coming back. Who's standing behind you?" Serafina's eyes were red, and she pointed toward the entrance. The sound of drizzling rain came from the half-open door, and Alistair felt a chill run down his spine for the first time. Serafina's condition seemed to have worsened. Her state was truly concerning, as if something was amiss. Thus, she rushed to the door in front of Alistair. "Alistair, I'm back." Serafina's expression softened instantly, as if the 20-year-old Isolde truly stood before her. "I know it's been difficult for you, but I truly long for a home." She mimicked Isolde's mannerisms, taking steps toward him. "You need to make her feel your love." This was the phrase Serafina's psychiatrist had repeated to Alistair most often, but Alistair wanted her to feel it even more deeply. He almost wanted to take a knife, kneel before Serafina, and beg her to cut open his heart. Let her see that every corner of his heart was filled with thoughts of her. In the end, they had a huge argument. Serafina brandished a knife in the air, indicating she never wanted to see Alistair again. With no other choice, Alistair left. Lately, Serafina's mental state had been poor, causing a backlog of work. After half a month of constant busyness, she accepted an interview in an exhausted state, even lacking the energy to respond to the journalist's rude questions. She only whispered, "Sorry, I'm already married." The reporter looked at Alistair in surprise and said, "I thought you said you were married to avoid trouble. Could you share some details about your wife?" Alistair gently twirled the wedding ring on his left ring finger, his expression softening. "Her name is Serafina. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a hospital bed." Alistair was at the door, as if he had rushed in from outside. He approached me, still smelling of rain and dirt. "How is Isolde?" I asked, my voice hoarse and raspy. Alistair took off his wet coat and tossed it aside. He sat down on a chair in the corner, leaning against the wall, and it took a moment before I noticed his Adam's apple move. "Do you really want something to happen to her?" His voice was flat, and I couldn't make out what he meant. However, there was one thing Isolde said that I agreed with. Alistair loved Isolde, and now that she was back, I should leave, so I stared at Alistair's eyes with some resentment. Yes, I did want her to suffer. Alistair's eyelashes trembled slightly, then he replied softly, "You've already gotten what you wanted." What did he mean? Isolde died in a car accident 5 years ago. Alistair's words echoed in my mind. He hadn't mentioned it for a long time. But every time he did, Isolde would immediately appear before my eyes. This time was no different. Isolde was wearing her usual white dress, her hair loose. Walking into the ward from outside, she was holding a bouquet of white flowers, her face looking pale. She was there. I stared intently at every one of Isolde's movements. But Alistair grabbed me, his face filled with concern. "Seraphina, Isolde is dead. You can only see her because you're sick. Listen to me, take your medicine, and we'll get you better, okay?" He held me tightly, causing me pain. Not far away, Isolde suddenly dropped the white flowers and pulled out a knife from somewhere, charging toward me with a fierce expression. I pushed Alistair away and stepped back. Alistair tried to grab me, repeating, "Isolde is dead. She's right there. Isolde is right there. Can't you see her?" She was smiling at me, holding a knife in her hand. "She wanted to hurt me, Alistair. Isolde wants to hurt me." I struggled desperately, but Alistair held me tightly, not letting me move. I felt something warm, drop by drop, falling on my neck. Alistair was crying. Why? Was it because he felt guilty for helping Isolde try to harm me? As the sharp knife grew closer, I stopped struggling. Let it be. The pain didn't come. The ward door swung open again, and Thaddeus stood at the entrance. Half of my body was hanging out the window, with only my waist held tightly by Alistair. Isolde was gone. It all happened too quickly. By the time I reacted, I had already been carried back to the bed by Alistair. Seraphina, Thaddeus, who had finally come to his senses, rushed over and gave me a tight hug. "You saw Isolde again, didn't you? It must be Alistair who made you suffer again. Why don't we leave together? I promise I'll leave." I pushed Thaddeus away, my emotions running high, rolled up my sleeves, and revealed the scar across my wrist. "What can you promise? I'm only 10 years old. They've always raised me like a boy. They even cut my hair short, just like Thaddeus's. Even my parents could only tell us apart by our clothes. So when he went out to steal money wearing my clothes, the blame fell on me. When the beggars came, I had no money to give them. My father tied my hands and hung me at the door, leaving me there all day. The town was bustling with people, many of whom knew us. I screamed and cried until my tears ran dry. All I got in return was my father's heartless kick and my mother's strange glance. That feeling, I'll never forget it. Thaddeus was pushed to his knees by me, his eyes red, repeatedly saying he was sorry and that he didn't know. They didn't tell me anything. That shirt was clearly the one my mother had given me to wear. That day, I accidentally stained my own clothes and was in a hurry to go to tutoring class. So she just grabbed a random one for me. I stared blankly at Thaddeus. So he had known all along that I was wronged. No wonder he, who never spent a penny, was willing to pay out of his own pocket to resolve this matter. No wonder he looked at me with that expression when he saw me hanging there. This was the first time in my life I saw guilt in his eyes. Thaddeus stole money to buy Seraphina a birthday gift. Every time it was his birthday, he always got to eat cake and toys. But Seraphina could only hide in the kitchen and eat the egg custard her mother steamed for her. On other days, Seraphina could only eat egg custard on her birthday. When Thaddeus was young, he would often ask his mother, "Mom, is our family really that poor? Why does Seraphina have such a hard life?" Every time, his mother would remain silent, gently stroking Thaddeus's head and saying, "You must work hard one day. You'll take Mom and your sister away from your father." His father didn't feel well towards Seraphina. This was Thaddeus's first impression of his father. At the time, he didn't understand why his mother insisted on separating from his father. When he returned from school, he saw Seraphina hanging at the door, barely clinging to life. The crystal ball he had been planning to give her fell to the ground and shattered. The unspoken happy birthday seemed like something Seraphina would never hear. Because the next day, he was left alone in the house. On the day Seraphina was taken away, Thaddeus found the rope he had thrown away earlier, the one that had been tied around Seraphina. He locked himself in his bedroom. The rope, stained with blood, still had traces of Seraphina's blood and flesh. He wrapped the rope around his wrists repeatedly, as if self-harming, until the wounds became severe, leaving scars on his wrists identical to Serafina's. After a week in the hospital, Alistair brought me back home. After much thought, I had no idea where else to go. I stood in the living room, staring at the empty wall in the distance. The wedding photo in the corner was gone. Probably discarded. I felt like I was being forgotten. Lately, Alistair has been very busy. After bringing me home, he left in a hurry again. I listened to his footsteps growing fainter and the sound of the front door closing. There was always a door between us that I couldn't open. Actually, my first encounter with Alistair wasn't during that snowstorm. It was one summer. My mother was working at the restaurant. And after school, I was locked out of the house, so I went to look for her. That day, there was an event at the restaurant and it was all set up. As I walked through the lobby, I saw a little girl about my age wearing a princess dress. Later, I found out she was little Isolde. She was surrounded by people who were all blessing her and praising her enthusiastically. Alistair gave her a diamond necklace. Everyone said the necklace was very expensive, even more expensive than buying the entire restaurant. From that moment on, I realized that Alistair and I were from completely different worlds. Isolde came again. She was still wearing that white dress, but the hem had some red stains, as if it had been stained by something. Don't you think this place looks empty? She stared at the wall where the wedding photo had once hung. I glanced at it briefly before looking away and asking her, "What do you want to say?" Isolde leaned against the sofa with a confident smile. "You'll never win Alistair's heart. Let me help you? I have a good background and loving parents. And Alistair is completely devoted to me." I agreed and took her to the photo studio. After explaining my request to the photographer, he looked at me strangely. Maybe he'd never seen a legitimate wife bring her mistress to take photos before, but everything went smoothly. When the developed photos arrived, I hung them on the wall immediately. Alistair came home from work and was immediately drawn to them. He stared at them intently, his eyes gentle, with a hint of surprise on his face. "Do you like them?" I asked softly. Alistair replied as usual that they were beautiful. I nodded and then said what I had prepared. "If you think it's nice, then let's get divorced. After we divorce, you can see Isolde every day." Isolde, Alistair's expression changed immediately. He looked surprised, but he should have been happy. I didn't quite understand his behavior. I tilted my head forward to see his expression, which was hidden by his messy hair. Unexpectedly, he suddenly smiled. "All these years, you just didn't believe you were sick. I've tried many methods, but you refused to take medicine or undergo treatment." Alistair spoke as he strode toward my bedroom. By the time I realized it, he had already started packing my luggage. "The doctor said your condition is quite serious. If you don't seek treatment immediately, there could be severe consequences." I was still thinking about how to tell you this, but Alistair paused, and even his back seemed lonely. "You seem like you're losing yourself." The air was so still it felt suffocating, and I didn't realize when I started crying. After a moment, Alistair turned around and gently cupped my face. "Serafina, look at me." I couldn't help but lift my head to look at him. "Do you love me?" he asked. When I was 10, he brought me home, and I was in a terrible state. When I was 11, he made me a birthday cake taller than me. When I was 14, he used $10,000 to stop my parents from taking me away. When I was 16, I confessed my feelings to him, but he politely rejected me. By the time I was 18, I attended a grand coming-of-age ceremony, and everyone knew there was a girl named Serafina by Alistair's side. At 20, I developed heart disease, and at 21, I married Alistair. Strangely, I can't remember what happened after that, no matter how hard I try. Over the past 5 years, I've lived every day with dedication, but looking back now, everything feels blurry. I always feel like Alistair doesn't love me. Did I really make a mistake? I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. This place is a bit different from what I imagined. The atmosphere in the hospital isn't oppressive, and the doctors and nurses are very concerned about my condition. However, I still feel like there's nothing wrong with me. Until the doctor showed me 2 videos. One day, I fell down the stairs on the 2nd floor. At the time, I was alone in the hallway, feeling like I was talking to myself, like a strange person. The second video was taken in a photography studio. I was still alone, talking to myself. Only now do I understand the strange expression on the cameraman's face. Not far away, Isolde was leaning against the wall, hugging her arm because her long hair covered most of her face, but I could faintly see that the other half looked terrible. Like she had been pressed into the ground. They all say you're gone. I glanced around at the doctors and nurses. What about you? Do you think I'm dead? I instinctively raised my hand to touch my heart. It was still warm, and my heart was still beating, so I answered, I'm still alive. Isolde smiled, a particularly bright smile. But the skin on her face was peeling off in patches. I lowered my head and didn't look at her, took the medicine the doctor prescribed, and obediently underwent treatment. But the Isolde who was called a hallucination didn't disappear. Instead, she stood there leisurely watching me. She felt so real that it seemed like the rest of my life would be spent entangled with her until the very end. You still think I'm gone? After the doctor left, Isolde leaned over my bed and looked at me. Her blood-stained fingers gently traced my face, leaving no trace behind. You know I'm already dead. You've always known. If that's the case, why not try to let yourself go? It's not that you can't, is it? Isolde spoke directly. It was precisely because of that dare not that I had avoided her for 5 years. Even now, my first reaction was to avoid. I didn't notice her injuries or realize she could appear before me at any moment. I tried to convince myself that the Isolde before me was a real person. I failed. Isolde took my hand, her fingers were ice cold, completely devoid of warmth. I'll take you to see the place where I once lived. At the bustling intersection, I stood there feeling like I was trapped inside a giant glass dome. All the surrounding sounds faded away, leaving only Isolde's voice clear and distinct in my ears. Do you see it? Right at that intersection. She leaned against my shoulder from behind and extended a wounded finger, pointing forward. 5 years have passed, and the events of the past have grown fuzzy, but I could almost vividly imagine the terrifying scenes Isolde described. I was there at that moment, crushed under a passing truck. You know, truck drivers usually have insurance. So he was worried I wasn't dead, and dragged my body for dozens of meters. Serafina, did you see all of this? The road was covered in my blood. Isolde's hand pressed heavily on my shoulder. I couldn't help but kneel down with a gurgle. Isolde pretended to be surprised and knelt down to face me. This isn't good, is it? But how I died doesn't really matter. She sat in front of me, propping her chin up, and smiled as she said the thing I didn't want to face the most. Do you remember whose heart is beating in your chest? Yes, I stammered, unable to say the 2 words even though they were all I needed to say. Isolde's smile vanished. She grabbed my collar, her expression turning grim. Serafina, you should remember now. If it weren't for my heart, Alistair would never have chosen you. He kept you until the 5 years were up, saying he wanted to be with you forever. But it wasn't because he loved you. It was because he needed to take care of my heart. I've been protecting the only thing I have in this world. How dare you enjoy what should have been mine without a shred of guilt? Isolde's voice faded away with the traffic. The person before me was no longer the one consumed by anger. All that remained was Alistair in the distance and the onlookers, just like years ago when I was hung on the front door. I felt embarrassed and pained. A truth I had avoided for 5 years suddenly appeared before me, leaving me dizzy. I wasn't very close to Isolde, and we rarely had the chance to meet. Before she died, the only thing I knew was that she and Alistair had a youthful promise. Serafina, are you okay? Alistair walked over from a distance, bent down, and draped a coat over me. I didn't speak, just shook my head silently. That day, Alistair learned that Serafina had suffered a sudden heart attack and rushed to the hospital. Just as he was about to leave school, he was stopped by Isolde. Her white dress fluttered gently in the wind, her feelings were plain to see. Her face flushed as she handed him the love letter she had written carefully. But Alistair didn't open it. Instead, he looked anxiously toward the school gates. I'm sorry, but I thought I made it clear when I mentioned the engagement at home earlier. I have someone I like. I've always treated you as a regular friend. If you think there's anything about me that's inappropriate, feel free to tell me. But right now, I really have an urgent matter to attend to. Is it because of that little beggar again? I've told you many times, Serafina isn't a beggar. Can you please respect her? Alistair rarely lost his temper, and Isolde was stunned. How could the confident Isolde tolerate being rejected after confessing her feelings, and then being treated like this? So the 2 of them had a big fight. Finally, Alistair pushed her away and hurriedly turned and left. Isolde was furious and wanted to follow Alistair to see what Serafina was up to. But a car was speeding toward them from a distance. I'm back home. That prominent photo was still hanging there, but it wasn't the Isolde I remembered. It was my face. I tore it down and threw it on the ground, the frame shattered, and the fine cracks on the shards resembled my jumbled thoughts. Alistair sighed beside me, then grabbed my wrist and pulled me out of the glass shards. Serafina, whether you believe it or not, I've never liked Isolde, I know. He's been saying that for years. I never really believed him. Occasionally, when I was lucid, I only thought it was a delaying tactic to keep Isolde's heart. I didn't respond, and Alistair continued. From beginning to end, I've only ever loved you. From the day you confessed your feelings to me when you were 16, there was no one else in my heart. But you were still young back then, and I was worried you might meet someone more suitable. The weather during the rainy season is always unpredictable. It started raining again. The raindrops are tapping against the window, as if trying to wash away all the misunderstandings of the past 5 years. Alistair's forehead touched mine, and his voice was so soft I could barely hear him. Please believe me this once, just this once. His hand trembled slightly as he placed it on my head. I nodded, and tears finally streamed down my face. It rained for 3 days straight, but on the 4th day, the sky finally cleared. Alistair took me to Isolde's grave. Her young face was smiling, and I still remembered how hard it was to accept that the compatible heart was Isolde's. I didn't stay there for long. Isolde probably didn't want to see me either. On the way home, I ran into someone I didn't want to see, Thaddeus. He was holding a bouquet of flowers, his smile tinged with flattery. Serafina, congratulations on your recovery. I didn't take the flowers, and his smile froze. You still have a problem with me? Don't I have a right to? I asked. Thaddeus paused, then whispered. You do. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm. I frowned impatiently, then turned back to see him crying. Serafina, sister, I don't really want you to forgive me. I just missed you so much. Ever since we parted when we were 10, I dreamed of you every day in my dreams. You said you hated me, that I had taken away our parents' love. You hated me, and I was also in great pain because of myself. When I was 16, I accidentally found out about you, and I actually went to see you secretly. The teenager spent all his remaining pocket money on a one-way ticket. Finally, he saw the sister he had been longing for. Although she was still very thin, at least she seemed to be living better than at home. That day, I saw you following Alistair, who was carrying your backpack. Just that one glance made me feel that you had been happier in the past few days than any day before. I thought to myself, I shouldn't disturb you. When I miss you, I come to see you secretly. But now, I really can't go on by myself. My mother couldn't bear the domestic violence and chose to take her own life. My father passed away 2 years ago due to alcoholism. Thaddeus cried bitterly. As he raised his hand to wipe away his tears, his sleeve slipped down, revealing his wrist. A distinct scar caught my eye. It was a scar left from multiple injuries and recoveries. I unconsciously grabbed his wrist, my fingertips touching the wound that hadn't fully healed. You, Thaddeus, slightly pulled back his body but didn't pull his hand away. He stared intently at my face. I just frowned and let go of his hand. Thaddeus? You really don't have to do this. The slightly warm wrist felt icy cold in the breeze. How to describe this feeling? It was like carefully searching for a bit of sweetness, only to discover that the candy wasn't meant for you. Seeing Thaddeus freeze, I took a step back. I'll ask you one thing. Did you really not participate in that incident? Yes, Thaddeus answered firmly, even a bit excitedly, his voice changing. I closed my eyes, my body swaying slightly. Fortunately, Alistair behind me caught me, allowing me to calm down and gather my thoughts. All right, then I'll consider you the last family I have in this world. I'll come visit you every holiday. Thaddeus knew in his heart that this was probably Serafina's final concession. The weather was unpredictable, and it started raining suddenly. After Serafina left, Thaddeus stood there for a long time, until his entire body was soaked through, and he felt like he couldn't hold on any longer. He believed Serafina would be fine. That was enough for him.